Finishing strong, Iowa Senator Tom Harkin closing in on retirement, but seems to be quickening his pace. We're talking with Senator Harkin on this edition of Iowa Press.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation.
Iowa banks know you want honest advice about how to best reach your financial goals, whether it's financing and education, buying a new home, growing a business, or funding retirement. Iowa Banks, Iowa Values. MyIowaBank.com.
The Rotary Clubs of Iowa and Rotary International.
In 1985, Rotary International committed to a goal of ending polio worldwide. Very soon now, after immunizing over 2 billion children, the goal will be achieved. Rotary, humanity in motion.
Alliant Energy, working to help Iowa small businesses become more profitable with energy-efficient heating, cooling, lighting, and more. Information is available at alliantenergy.com.
Iowa Communications Network. The ICN is committed to the enhancements of distance learning and continues to meet the demands for greater access of high-speed internet by educational users. For decades, Iowa Press has brought you politicians and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond. Now celebrating more than 40 years of broadcast excellence on statewide Iowa Public Television. This is the Friday, September 19 edition of Iowa Press. Here is Dean Borg.
Tom Harkin counts 40 years in Congress. That's 10 in the U.S. House of Representatives, 30 in the Senate. That seniority, the Senate's longest-serving Democrat, carries prestige and, more importantly, power. Although he's not seeking another term, Mr. Harkin is continuing at full throttle, using these final months to accomplish priorities. One of the iconic events of his congressional career, the annual Harkin Steak Fry, has national notoriety, and the political coals from Final Fry just last weekend are still glowing. Senator Harkin, welcome back to another Iowa Press.
Always glad to be here, Dean. Thanks very much.
That chair is always reserved and ready for you when you want to come.
Well, I appreciate it very much.
And across the table, James Lynch, who writes for the Gazette published in Cedar Rapids, and Radio Iowa News Director Kay Henderson.
Senator, this past week, you were among the senators who voted for a continuing resolution which included money for the president's objective in Iraq and Syria. How do you know that you will be arming the right people on the ground in Syria?
Well, the short answer is, Kay, I don't. I have serious reservations about what we're doing in Syria. But we didn't have a separate vote on that. We had a vote basically just on the keeping the government going until December the 11th. And quite frankly, I felt I should vote for that for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is I was able to get $88 million in it for the Ebola, to go after the Ebola outbreak in Africa. And the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, said they desperately needed that money for equipment and personnel, that kind of thing. So that was in that continuing resolution.
So your vote had an asterisk by it?
Oh, an asterisk. Well, look, again, that goes. The continuing resolution goes till December 11th. So we've got October, November. We got about almost at least 2 months anyway, to see what the president does and how he fashions this and how he shapes it. And I think it gives us some time to do a little bit more analyzing of just what what he wants to do there.
So what questions do you need to have answered?
Well, I just want to know how this is going to unfold, number one. What is the extent of our involvement going to be? Is this going to be one of those things where it just keeps escalating and escalating and we get in further and further and further? The other thing I want to know is why aren't our allies, our friends, if you will, in that region, why aren't they stepping up? Saudi Arabia has, well, I'm close, 225 F-15s. They got a whole bunch of Tornadoes. Those are French jets. Where are they? Why aren't they providing the air cover?
Why do you think that is? I mean, you have some suppositions.
I'd like to know the answer to that, Dean. I don't know. I've asked that question. Where are the Saudis? Where are the Turks? Turks have a long border there. They're part of NATO. They have all kinds of aircraft. Why? Where are the Turks in this in this. Hopefully, some of these answers will be forthcoming in the next month or so.
But your vote isn't contingent, of course it's not contingent, but your support isn't contingent upon bringing the Saudis and the Turks in, is it?
Might be. Might be. I want to see what the Saudis are going to do. You know, I've got a thing about the Saudis, to be honest with you. You go back to 9/11, there were 19 hijackers. 15 were Saudis. 2 were Egyptians, and 2 were Jordanians or something. Not one Iraqi, not one. But we invaded Iraq. The Saudis, and we know from intelligence and other things, that the Saudis have been funding for years jihadist movements from Pakistan to Algeria and Morocco. So it's time for the Saudis to figure out whose side they really are on. And I tell you, they've got a lot of firepower. They got a lot of firepower. They bought all the planes from us. Well, they bought it with the money we gave them for the oil that we brought to this country. And I want that, they should, now they said they were going to do some training. That's not enough. That's not enough.
Senator, you spoke earlier of concerns about escalation. Does this remind you at all of how we got into Vietnam? We sent in trainers, we sent in advisors, and pretty soon we were up to our neck?
It does, James. That's why I say, you know, you start on something like this, and then a couple of our planes get shot down, people get captured, bad things happen, and then you get more of an urge to send in more maybe ground troops, or maybe the forces that are arrayed there get run over, they don't fight effectively, and so we need to send in troops to back them up. That's what concerns me.
General Dempsey of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said this week that it might be necessary to send in ground troops to basically win this situation. What's the criteria for sending in ground troops?
I wish I could answer that question. I don't know. These are all questions that need to be answered forthrightly by the White House, I might add, by the White House, before we vote on this again in December. You know, this funding, that what we did, it all ends on December 11th. Yep. So they're going to have to come back.
You mentioned the 9/11 hijackers who had passports to come into this country. Do you think that the administration should be more aggressive in policing passports of potential enemy combatants who may be coming here?
Sure, I think, of course. Sure they should be.
You mentioned earlier Ebola.
Yeah.
Has the U.S. and the world responded too slowly to this?
Yes, but, and this is something I do know more about because it comes under my committee jurisdiction. We in these countries like Guinea and Sierra Leone, Liberia, Central African Republic, they have no public health infrastructure. And we should have been doing something there with them over the years to build that public health infrastructure. So when an outbreak happens like this, they don't have the labs, they don't have the technicians, they don't have the public health personnel that speak the same language, that are culturally sensitive to people like that, to go out and stop this as soon as it starts. You have to remember that since 1976, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we've had 16 outbreaks of Ebola in Africa. And each one we've been able to put out pretty readily. This one seems to be more virulent, and it has spread more rapidly. And we did start moving in right away, but some of our healthcare workers were denied access to some of these rural areas. And if they weren't denied access, they were threatened by local people who thought they were coming in to do something to them. I mean, you got to think, when you're in a rural village and you don't even have the basics, and some people show up in a truck and they got these space suits on, that could be pretty frightening. And so what happened is that local customs, like washing the dead like they do and everything, it just spread that virus. And then what happened is people, and again, because of more rapid transportation today than we've ever had in the past, a lot of people in these rural areas had a cousin or they've had someone who moved to the city. And so when they got sick, they thought the best place to go is the city, you see, because that's where they could get help. That's the last place you want someone with the Ebola virus that's tested positive to be in the city.
Because of the density of population.
Exactly. Then it just starts spreading like mad. Well, I've been to a lot of briefings on this. We're going to get on top of it. I don't think we should be unduly alarmed in this country right now, but we've got to get on top of this in a hurry before it starts getting into more and more cities. That's why we put this money in the bill. But if I might just take 30 seconds more. I traveled throughout Africa with Tom Frieden about 1.5 years ago. He's the head of our Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And we were looking at HIV. Ebola hadn't started then. And so what occurred to me was these countries lacked any semblance of a Center for Disease Control. And so last year in the appropriations bill, I put in just $6 million to get our CDC to start building CDCs in this Center for Disease Controls in those countries. Well, this fall, our CDC, our Center for Disease Control, is going to announce the first 2 or 3 of these. I told my colleagues, I'm leaving the Senate, but don't drop the ball on this one. We've got to build these laboratories and these institutions in these countries so that as soon as something breaks out, they've got the right personnel. It's not me from America, it's their people. They know how to test. They can do the laboratory work. They can do all that stuff right there. We've got, think of it like military outposts that are going to put down problems before they get too big. It's the same here with these viruses. I didn't mean to go on so long, but
that's fine, Senator. But moving from Africa to Scotland, the Scots voted Thursday to maintain their union with Great Britain. Why should America care about that? And is this nationalist movement sort of indicative of chaos in government around the world, separatist movements in Ukraine and Spain and elsewhere?
I guess I don't know. Did we really care that much about Scotland? I think about it.
Should we have cared?
I don't think so. It's up to them to decide. I didn't know which way they're going to go. They voted to stay with Great Britain.
Well, are you really saying we really didn't need to care because either way it's not going to affect us greatly?
I think that's probably right.
Right.
Yeah.
Senator, you have been pushing for a vote in the U.S. Senate on a bill that would raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour.
Yes.
Isn't that a bit like the House voting over and over to repeal the Affordable Care Act? Because you know the House won't take that bill up.
Well, what I was hoping, Kay, was that we would get the votes, which we didn't, to pass it, and that might get the ball rolling on the House to do something. You know, just put a little pressure on the House of Representatives. But we just didn't get it passed in the Senate. That's the problem. A lot of people said, well, maybe it should be less than 10-10. Well, not really. The way we picked 10-10, that just got it above the poverty line, just right above the poverty line, and then we indexed it to inflation, so that in the future, never again would the minimum wage be below the poverty line. That's why it's at 10-10.
Are you thinking that the federal government will default now to the states and let them set minimum wage because you're not going to get anything done in Congress?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, states are doing it. A lot of them are doing it on their own. Yes. And some cities, for crying out loud. Seattle, Washington.
Yes. And
a city just south of Seattle this January voted in $15 an hour. It's interesting. There was a lot of people protest. There was a hotel owner, big hotel in SeaTac, testified before the city council that they went to 15, he would have to lay people off, and it would be just terrible for his business. And, well, they went ahead and passed $15. That same hotel just announced a $16 million expansion, and they're hiring more people. So every place that we have seen where the minimum wage has been increased, the economy picks up in that area.
Senator Harkin, last Sunday, you, as I said, hosted the several thousand visitors for that annual steak fry.
Yeah.
And guests including former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. You recognize them with titles that I wonder if you might be predicting the future.
So when Bill Clinton was running for president in 1992, a lot of you remember he was dubbed the comeback kid. Well, I have a new phrase. President Clinton and Hillary Clinton are now the comeback couple in America.
The comeback couple.
Yeah, that's right.
Senator, are you predicting a comeback for the Clintons, and is that an endorsement of Hillary Clinton's presidential aspirations?
Well, I was sort of saying they keep coming. I think I said after that, they keep coming back to Iowa, and we welcome them here. And I also said that I think I said that in Hillary that there's 25 chapters in her book, but we know there's going to be more chapters written, regardless of what she does. I don't know what Hillary's going to do. Honestly, I don't. I know it's weighing heavily on her. We had some private conversations, and she saw Ruth and me playing and going around with our grandkids before we came out on the stage. We were back in this shed, and so I wanted them to take a picture with my kids and my grandkids. And she just wistfully said to me, "It just looks so wonderful." She said, because now I'm going to have grandchildren. She is. And I got to think it weighs heavily. I mean, she has been First Lady of Arkansas, First Lady of the United States, U.S. Senator, Secretary of State. That's a lot of public service. And if you're going to run for president, that's a 10-year commitment. And she knows what it's like. So I got to believe this is a real decision she's going through. People say, "Oh, she's already made the decision," and all that. I don't think so. I think this is weighing heavily on her. I wouldn't be surprised if she went one way or the other.
Are the American people weary, though, of the Bushes and the Clintons? There's all this talk that Jeb Bush may run.
How about that?
Do you think the country is ready to move on beyond the Clintons and the Bushes?
Well, they did with Obama and Mitt Romney. I mean, as a candidate. So I don't know. Obviously, Jeb Bush has got his own record to run on, not his brother's, I hope, but he has his own record to run on, and so would Hillary. You know, you said you introduced Hillary as secretary, but state Hillary Clinton. But I refer to her as senator because I think a senator outranks Secretary of State.
Okay, all right. Point well taken. I apologize for that.
No, that's all right.
Senator, you talked about, in your remarks Sunday, saying that there's a time to bow out gracefully.
Yeah.
Is it time for the Clintons, who have been on the national stage for more than 20 years, is it their time to bow out?
Hey, I got 40, so I don't know about 20 years. Look, each individual has to make up his or her own mind on something like that. I just know what was right for me, and I guess that's just how I feel. And I feel that it kind of applies across the board. If you've been in public office that long, as you said earlier, you get more power, you get all the prestige, you got the nice offices and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, you just got to stop and think that, you know, that maybe younger people should come in.
Well, we have another clip here I want to show you. Mrs. Clinton used the occasion at that steak fry to bring up President Obama's signature legislation. Let's take a look at that.
And thanks to the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies have been forced to refund more than $1.7 million to Iowa families.
When she was in the White House and continuing when she was in the Senate, no one fought more passionately for health reform. Hillary was not there when the Affordable Care Act was signed into law. She was, of course, Secretary of State. But I want you all to know that her fingerprints are all over that legislation. It would not have happened but for her strenuous advocacy in that committee all those years she was there to get a health care bill passed in Congress.
Jim?
Senator, that's sort of an interesting choice of words to say that her fingerprints were all over it. That typically is used in an accusing manner rather than a praise. Are you hanging the Affordable Care Act around her neck?
Oh, no, I was praising her. Well, maybe the fingerprint's not the right word, but her force behind it. For the 8 years she was on my committee, well, on the committee I now chair, Ted Kennedy was chair, ranking member during that period of time. We worked very closely on fashioning a health care bill. We felt that our time would come, that we would get at some point that we'd be able to move something like this. So that's what I mean. She was very instrumental in getting this to the forefront.
Will it be a monkey on her back if she decides to run for president?
We have 7.3 million Americans, James, just this week. 7.3 million Americans paying their premiums. That's 7.3 million Americans that never had health insurance before. It's my cousin who has breast cancer, who got dropped, but now can get health insurance coverage even though she has a pre-existing condition. That's happening all over. It's elderly people. The donut hole is closing. And as she said, it's refunding money to seniors here in Iowa. A lot of good things are happening. Prevention. We're now getting more people coming in for their checkups early on. That was my part of the bill. That's never happened before. So this health care bill is working. Bumpy start, bad things, yes, but we went from that old system of people being uninsured to a new system where everyone can be insured.
Republicans are still talking about repeal and replace. Do you sense that the public at large is unhappy with this law?
Okay, maybe I haven't been paying attention enough, but I haven't seen too many Republicans running around and making that a major part of their campaign this fall.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's working. Because people know it's every parent with a young person that's just starting out in life or still in school that stays on their policy, saving them that money. It's every senior that I mentioned that now that donut hole is closing and they're getting refunds every year. It's every person who had a pre-existing condition who can now get health care coverage. It's people who can go in for their colonoscopies and breast cancer screening and cervical cancer screening and cholesterol screening with no charge.
Yeah, but Senator, you're not running again, and those who are don't seem to be saying the same things you are.
Well, they
seem to be distancing themselves from it.
Well, I advised every Democrat out there running, go out there and tell them what this bill does, because there's more people now are figuring out that this is one of the best things that's ever happened.
Senator, you've made clear in your remarks at the Steak Fry and elsewhere that sort of you want a running handoff to hand the baton to Bruce Braley.
Yes.
Given what you've put into that, are you going to take it as a personal offense if Iowans elect Joni Ernst this fall?
No, of course not. Although I certainly hope that Iowans, well, like Bruce Braley, of course I'm campaigning for him, but as a personal offense? Nah, I learned from Harold Hughes, long before here, maybe you remember Harold Hughes. He told me one time when I ran and lost once, he said, one thing I always remember. He said, two things remember in politics. I'll never forget him telling me this. He said, number one, never take it personally. Number two, when you get up in the morning, be sure you can look yourself in the mirror. I'll never forget that.
What is your role in the closing weeks of this 2014 election? Iowans are seeing Chuck Grassley in an ad for a congressional candidate on the Republican side. Are you going to appear on Iowans' television screens? Are you going to be out there encouraging people to get to the polls?
Sure I will. But, you know, these kinds of endorsements, Ruth and I, my wife and I, have always chuckled because endorsements just don't mean a hoot, you know, when you do those kinds of things. But I will be out campaigning, and I will be telling this story. I just found this. It was just handed to me the other day that Joni Ernst has been in the Iowa Senate for 4 years. And as you know, I chair the Education Committee, so I always look at education. 4 years. There were 8 votes during her time in there on funding for Iowa colleges and community colleges. 8 times. She voted no every time. During her 4 years there were then 6 votes on education for elementary and secondary schools. There were 6 votes, voted no every time.
On the other hand,
she was in the,
go ahead.
She was in the minority and she was voting against democratically crafted bills, is the argument.
But wait a second. There were Republicans that voted for this. You know, A lot of Republicans voted for the funding bills for education during those years. Voting consistently against education is not an Iowa value. It is not an Iowa value.
Many of the people who are watching you right now are also watching a series by Ken Burns about the Roosevelts.
Sure.
And on Thursday evening's episode, there was a historian who said, a person like Franklin Delano Roosevelt could not be elected president today because of his disability. That's sort of encapsulating what was said. As someone who's worked on disability issues over the years, do you think that's true?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, we have members of Congress with disabilities that use wheelchairs. In my time there, I know we've had at least 2, if not 3 senators we have that use wheelchairs. We have 2 right now. Senator Kirk from Illinois, and a Republican, and Senator Johnston from South Dakota. Both use wheelchairs. No one seems to pay much attention to that. No, I disagree with that. I think people with disabilities are getting elected all over the country.
Let me, in our final time here, what is it that you want to get done in your final time now? Your time's running out too.
Well, yes, it is.
What's the one priority?
The one priority that I have, well, the one priority is in December to get an appropriations bill passed that I worked very hard on that has increased Pell Grants. It has increased support for student loans. It has money for Title I schools, IDEA. It has more money for National Institutes of Health. Those are important things that I want to get done.
And the time is gone. We intend to have you back again before you leave the Senate.
Well, I appreciate that.
That invitation's open.
Thanks so much.
And a programming note, next Friday night, you're going to see Iowa Press 1 hour earlier than you, 6:30, so that Iowa Public Television can present a PBS NewsHour special. It's called America After Ferguson. Gwen Eiffel will be moderating this PBS Town Hall meeting, exploring the issues of law enforcement, race, and civil rights in the wake of the Michael Brown death in Ferguson, Missouri. So join us on Iowa Press next Friday at 6:30, and then the usual time at noon on Sunday. I'm Dean Borg, and thanks for joining us today.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation.
Iowa banks know you want honest advice about how to best reach your financial goals, whether it's financing an education, buying a new home, growing a business, or funding retirement. Iowa Banks, Iowa Values. MyIowaBank.com.
The Rotary Clubs of Iowa and Rotary International.
In 1985, Rotary International committed to a goal of ending polio worldwide. Very soon now, after immunizing over 2 billion children, the goal will be achieved. Rotary, humanity in motion.
Alliant Energy, working to help Iowa small businesses become more profitable with energy-efficient heating, cooling, lighting, and more. Information is available at AlliantEnergy.com.
Iowa Communications Network. The ICN is committed to the enhancements of distance learning and continues to meet the demands for greater access of high-speed internet by educational users.